Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is the next in a series of live streams where I'm looking at some of the main houses in the world of Ice and Fire. Last time we looked at House Stark. Next week I think we'll probably look at House Targaryen. But today we're going to look at one of the biggest, the most important houses there is, but also a house that was almost invisible on the TV show. And in the books so far, hasn't really made huge amounts of an impression. So what is going on with House Hightower? What I'm going to do is I'll give a very brief introduction, just a little bit of an overview of the history. Then, as I always try to do, I'm going to frame this around questions that I've got from my patrons, and then pick up as many possible questions from the chat as we're going through. I did get a one super sticker, I think, from Ryan Larkin. Thank you. Before we went live, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. And let's go to just double checking I haven't missed anything before I launch into this. No, I don't think I have. Excellent. Okay, so House Hightower is one of those houses that when you read back through Fire and Blood, you suddenly realize quite how big and important they are. They're named actually as one of the three big houses, the other two being House Velaryon and House Baratheon, outside of House Targaryen, this is. So whereas you might get the impression from watching the TV show, say, or maybe even reading the books, that the big houses are House Stark, House Lannister, whoever. Actually, historically, no. During the Targaryen era, the three big houses were Baratheon, Velaryon, and Hightower. House Hightower are an ancient house, really old. They are probably before what we sort of count as being the start of humanity in Westeros, which was the invasion of the first men coming across from Essos, across the land bridge. They seem to precede that. There seem to have been, way back in what is called the Dawn of Days, which is before the Age of Heroes, there seem to have been some trading posts, some enclaves along the south coast, perhaps a bit along the east coast as well of Westeros. Now, the one that we know about is what is now known as Old Town. That was, as the Maesters say, that was where the traders from over in Essos used to come and presumably trade with the children of the forest, who were the people who lived in Westeros. So what sprung out from there is the island in the estuary of the River Honeywine, which became known as Battle Isle, which we don't know why. We can perhaps get into that a little bit later. Implication there was a battle there, but we haven't ever had any confirmation of what battle it was that was there. On that, there was an ancient structure, this kind of fused black stone that we see dotted around from place to place in Westeros and Essos in particular, that seems to hint of ancient things. Nobody really knows where it comes from, who did it. If anything, it seems to be of a technology or a magic way beyond what is existing at the moment in the world of Ice and Fire. And that seems to have been the first home base for House Hightower. Now, after the humanity came in across, the first men came across, they decided to build on top of this basic structure, which is described as being, as well as being this fused black stone, it's this kind of labyrinthine sort of edifice. And they decided to build on top of it. And 4 times they tried building a wooden tower on top of this. 4 times it didn't work, burnt down, stuff like that. And then finally they decided to build a stone tower. And the legends say that the person who was behind the design of that was our old friend Bran the Builder, who does get around quite a lot. He apparently built the Wall, Winterfell Crypt, Storm's End, and also this. So that kind of places it at the sort of the beginning of the Age of Heroes, as it were. Whether it actually was Bran, it's probably neither here nor there, to be honest. It is ancient. It is probably magical in some way, of the other things that that he is supposed to have been building or anything to go by. And that means that the Hightower itself is probably holding some kind of magical protection. We've not heard anything of this in the books, but Storm's End certainly does. The Wall certainly does. It seems very likely that Winterfell crypts have some kind of magical protection. So why wouldn't the Hightower as well? Anyway, that's their home. They stayed there ever since, and they over time, the city of Old Town grew up. It's called Old Town for a reason. This was the old city in Westeros, King's Landing. Yes, it's now the capital, but Old Town was the heartbeat of this. It's where it used to be for most of the time in Westeros. This was the biggest city. It's literally only in the last couple of hundred years or so that King's Landing has overtaken it. And the Hightowers then proceeded through their history to become wealthy, to become powerful, to become influential. And probably more than any other house, they have become political, and they have become very engaged in what's going on and very pragmatic about their own survival. So, for example, when House Gardner was the big enemy and came and sort of took over the Reach, then the Hightowers, instead of trying to fight to save their lives, they just married into them and reached an accommodation. Then the Andal invasion happened, and the Hightowers, basically, they just converted. And not only that, but they said, okay, so your faith, the faith of the Seven, why don't you make your home base here at Old Town? So they completely embraced it. When the Targaryens invaded, the Gardeners went out and got burned on the field of fire, and the Hightowers quite literally opened the city gates and said, come on in. And you know what? Not just come on in, but we will crown you king, Aegon, and we will embrace you as our lord and master. So every single turn, the Hightowers have been playing this kind of political game. You can see it happening again and again, even in recent history, with stuff like what's been happening in the books. They, by marriage, because Marjorie Tyrell is actually the daughter of a Hightower. We'll come on to this in a moment. She married Renly, so they had to declare for Renly. But when Stannis defeated Renly, or Renly was assassinated by Stannis, depending on your perspective, when that happened, they didn't shift over to Stannis. They kind of stayed slightly back, tried to figure out which way the wind was blowing on this, and eventually came in support of the Lannisters, which, they were at the time looking like the most powerful people. So, of course, they shifted in behind them. So again and again, you look at the House Hightower, you see a very politically pragmatic house, and they have got huge amounts of power, huge amounts of influence. They've got the faith of the Seven. Yes, the Great Sept is over in King's Landing, but the Starry Sept, the original home, is there in Old Town. They've got the Maesters there. The Citadel is based in Old Town. They have got the largest army in the Reach, which is the largest army in the entirety of Westeros. They are, we get told, as rich as the Lannisters. They have set up their own bank. Every single way that you look at this, they are hugely influential, hugely powerful, and they know what is going on around the place. But in the story that we have now, they have been strangely quiet. We've had 5 books. We've met one Hightower, who's really not hugely influential and important. Lord Hightower, Leighton Hightower, is up at the top of his high tower and has apparently not descended for 10 years. Who knows what he's doing? We've not met really any other high towers around and about. They're very quiet. They have got a huge army. They've got a navy. They've got huge amounts of wealth, and yet they are staying very quiet. So this is what a lot of the questions that we've got coming up are going to be focused in on, is that what are they actually up to? Because they are going to have a role in this. George R. R. Martin cannot build them up as this hugely important and influential house and then just not mention them with all of these earth-shattering things going on. And then with Fire and Blood, when you read it, you see quite how central they are to so much of what was going on in the first half of the Targaryen rule in Westeros. So they are very important, and they will have a role to play going forward. The question is, what? So that is the broad introduction to House Hightower. We'll get into a few questions from my patrons. One here from Lehiro Dinalankara saying, "Hi Robert, excited about this stream." I am too, actually. I love House Hightower. I think they're a fantastic and underrated house. I hope you share thoughts about Hightower involvement in the Dance of the Dragons and why. Yes, I've got that in about 2 questions time. I'm going to pick up on that and specifically about their involvement. But this, what I'll say is a sort of a preamble to this and an answer to this question. This was clearly some sort of, I would say, an aberration on their normal strategy, which is to kind of sit back and wait. What happened in the Dance of the Dragons was no less than a power grab. It was House Hightower, specifically Otto Hightower and Alicent Hightower, trying to take control, trying to usurp the named heir to the Targaryen throne. Now, this, as I say, is completely different. The Hightowers have always, because they meddle in politics, obviously they have to pick sides at some point, but this was proactively trying to do something rather than reactively trying to do something, which is what their normal state of being is. So this is one of the things I'm really looking forward to in House of the Dragon when the TV show comes along, is teasing out a little bit more why that is. Was it just that there were a couple of members of House Hightower who were just ambitious? It might be as simple as that, or was there something more going on? So that's a sort of a preamble to that one. Let's kick off with question. Oh, I have another question in the chat. Daft Cody, thank you so much, saying, will the Hightower itself survive Euron's assault? I'll talk about Euron's assault again, as I say, in a little bit, but I think probably yes. It would not surprise me if Old Town itself burns, but the High Tower itself survives. I suspect that there is a magical defense around that, and perhaps the High Towers, and again, this is something that the High Towers have done several times, is that their city burns around them, quite literally on occasion. It burns around them while they survive. And so it would not surprise me in the slightest if House Hightower and the High Tower itself survive whatever else is going on around them. The most important thing to House Hightower is House Hightower. Opening question from my patrons. Mary says, from your point of view, could Hightower really have some connection to an ancient empire and dragon lords that existed before Valyria and even the Long Night? This is it's a theory. It's a number of theories that are out there, that the High Towers could be connected to maybe the Great Empire of the Dawn or something along those lines, where the dragons were before the Valyrians happened. There are hints. George R. R. Martin has not given us chapter and verse on that, but there are hints. The first hint we've already covered, that Battle Isle, the base of the High Tower, is made of this fused stone that we see all the way off in the far east over in Essos. and we know that it was a trading post for people coming from Essos. And the other thing which we've got is a lot of the houses in Westeros. George R. R. Martin makes a great play of what their hair color is, what their eye color is, what is a typical Stark look, what is a typical Valyrian look, and all the rest of it. House Hightower, we don't get that because they've not played a big role. We haven't had that, oh, all Hightowers are whatever. So we just have a few different people to go by. Now, one of the people we have to go by as a description is a Liness Hightower, or Liness Hightower if you prefer. She was the wife of Jorah Mormont. Now, you'll remember his backstory, that she was the one that he won a tourney down Old Town, and basically he won her heart, and they married, and then they went up to Bear Island, and then she suddenly realized it's not exactly what she's used to. She was much more used to the high life, summer sun, beautiful things and all the rest of it. And Bear Island is beautiful, but it's not got much of a nightlife, let's put it that way. And then in order to try and please her, he bankrupted himself, tried to sell some people into slavery, his life descended and all the rest of it, and she left him. But we have hints of what she looks like, and one of the hints is that she looks a bit like Daenerys. So silvery blonde hair, purpley eyes, perhaps. We also have the one other member of House Hightower that we come into, who is Marjorie Tyrell's mother, Allery, and she again is described as having this sort of silver blondie hair. So although we don't know whether that is typical, what all Hightowers are like, it is perhaps instructive that that is part of their kind of genetic inheritance, which, as with the purple eyes of House Dane, implies that they are not first men. And this is something the Maesters say, that the Hightowers are probably not first men. So the sort of suggestion is that House Hightower and House Dane were part of this original trading sort of arrangement that seems to have happened between Westeros and Essos. Now, so they moved across not as part of the First Men, but perhaps from even further east. If you look at a map of the south of Westeros, you will actually see that there's quite a lot of symmetry between House Hightower and House Dane. They are the two main rivers that come down to the south of Westeros, ending in large estuaries, and in those estuaries there's an island, and on that island they have built their home. That is the case for House Hightower and House Dane, and both of them seem to have colouring that comes not from the First Men but from further east. So the hints are all there. We do not know, but that certainly seems to be the case, is that right down there on the south of the western part of the south coast of Westeros, there are some people who are not First Men. They are from somewhere else. So would they be from before Valyria? Definitely. They will have arrived from before Valyria was a thing. And would they have come from the great Empire of the Dawn? Quite possibly, but we do not know. Kevin Warner, thank you so much for the super chat, saying Robert missed live last week and really loved the video this week on the others. What role do you think the Tower will play in defeating the others? Well, thank you, and actually thank you for the chance to mention this. This was the latest in my Secrets of series, which is me in conversation with another creator, talking about sort of a mysterious place or group of people or something like that. And this time I had John Bronsteris. You may know him from around the community. It was his first time on this channel, but he had some amazing insights. So if you're at all interested in where the others come from, what they might be wanting, what the kind of the symbolism that George R. R. Martin is playing with when he's showing us the others, please do go and check that out. I released it yesterday, maybe even, yes, yesterday. I lose track of days sometimes, sorry. Do go and check that one out. I really enjoyed recording that one. That was the last, for those who notice these things, that was the last of the batch that I did, which had the dodgy audio, but John's audio comes through absolutely perfectly, so please don't let that put you off. But in terms of what I think the tower will play in defeating the others, I don't think that the others will get all the way down as far as the south coast of Westeros. Personally, I think that if they get past Winterfell, then that whole area around the Isle of Faces, Harrenhal, and all of that, that is where the sort of the final showdown will happen. But I think it probably will still play a role. It will certainly play a role in terms of knowledge. And Sam is going to be the person who's going to be escaping from the Citadel and heading north with knowledge about how to defeat the others, almost certainly. There's also a possibility, it's a kind of a throwaway line about the High Tower, which is that it is said that from the top of the High Tower you can see the wall. Now that, it's a throwaway line, but I think it's quite instructive, because almost certainly this isn't, you can't actually see, yes, they're both very tall things, but they are a couple of thousand miles away. You can not see from the other. So it makes me wonder whether you can see it not through normal means, but through magical means. Perhaps right at the top of the High Tower, there is a glass candle, an obsidian candle, that we know that there are some in Old Town. The Maesters have got some. They use them in some of their initiation rites. So they are around, and surely if anyone has got the ability to get them, then Lord Hightower has got the ability to get them. So it's possible that from the top of the High Tower you can see the wall. So the Hightowers may well know what is going on at the wall. They may well be aware of what is happening. And the question is what they do about that. Could they be involved in pushing people north to try and help out? Could they be involved in donating their knowledge and magic and power in some way to try and help defeat the others? I think it's entirely possible. The wild card in all this that we will obviously come onto in a bit is Euron, whether Euron will disrupt all their plans. But I think that they could well have a role in terms of understanding what is going on, and then perhaps equipping people. But I don't think the others will actually physically come down that far. Abitu, thank you so much, saying thanks for the videos you put out, mate. Great to finally catch you live. Well, welcome. If it's your first time watching live, you or anyone else, it's a different experience watching these live, so it's fantastic to have you. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on to question from Jared, saying some houses seem to be more magical than others. What do we know about the mystical or magical attributes of House Hightower? Well, not much more than what I've said already is the short answer. We're told, so the Hightower itself appears to be magical, but we've never seen any magic surrounding it. It was built by Bran the Builder, and we all know Bran the Builder is a magical builder. He's not just a normal builder. And when I say it was built by Bran the Builder, it might not have been. We don't know. This was in the Age of Heroes. This is the Age of Legends. We shouldn't take these things literally, as George R. R. Martin keeps on telling us. But even if it wasn't him, then the implication that it could have been built by him does seem to imply maybe it is a bit magical. So there's that. We don't hear about any huge magic that happens through most of their history. But then, since then, or in fact, right at the present day, we do have the two Hightowers who are magical, it would appear, or at least study magic, being Leighton Hightower and his daughter, who is known as the Mad Maid. Now, the Mad Maid is the kind of thing that George R. R. Martin does this a lot. Any female who uses magic tends to have some kind of derogatory name given to them. It doesn't mean that they are actually mad or evil or anything. It's just him showing an understanding of what we as humans often do. But what people say is that they are researching, they're doing magic up there. So when we don't know much at all is the short answer. But the hints are there that there is something magical going on. Hopefully we will see it, but no, we haven't had anything yet. Amonso, thank you so much for Super Chat saying first live. Welcome to you as well. Excellent. How many times have you read the books? I always find this a really hard question to answer. So I've read them through beginning to end twice. But then I started making these videos, and I have dived in and read. I mean, I've read some of the books. I read the first couple of books again for a third time, and then I've dipped in and read several chapters many times. So some chapters I've read lots, particularly if I'm researching a video on it. So the prologue to A Game of Thrones I must have read, I wouldn't wish to put a number to it, but lots of times. And then some of the other chapters, like the Varamir Sixskins prologue, incidentally, I've read probably more times than is good for my sanity. But in terms of sort of overall, it's been twice from beginning to end as a sort of a project, reading it all the way through. But then I just now I'm dipping in and out to wherever I need to get to, because I've got a handle on how they all fit together. But as I say, it's quite a hard question to answer, to be honest. I see people in there saying on my fourth reread and the rest. That's Tubbs. Your knowledge shines through, Tubbs. Question from Jared saying, with House of the Dragon, the spin-off, apparently focusing on the Dance of the Dragon storyline, could you discuss House Hightower's role in events leading up to the conflict? Mara Lee, I know that you were also asking this one as well, and we obviously had the super chat, which was sort of touched on this as well. So I'll give the overview here. It is very complicated and detailed, and as we move closer to the show going live, then I will definitely start ramping up my coverage of issues around the Dance of the Dragons. So there's a lot in there. But the short version of this is that around the time of the end of the reign of Jaehaerys I, the old king, long reign, much respected by everyone, but he was getting old. His last hand of the king was this guy called Otto Hightower, who seems to have been quite an ambitious person. Now, as the king was nearing the end of his days, Otto got his daughter, Alicent Hightower, to be looking after him, to be fetching things for him, to be reading to him, to be talking to him, nursing him, basically looking after him in the end of his days. And a bond and a connection grew there, and after Jaehaerys died, then she stayed in court, and Jaehaerys's grandson, Viserys, inherited the throne, and eventually then they married, Viserys and Alicent Hightower. Now, this made Alicent Hightower the queen. However, Viserys, her husband, had already decided that the heir should be Rhaenyra Targaryen, who was the daughter from his first marriage. Now, that started becoming an issue when Alicent Hightower started having children, because obviously she was wanting to have her own children on the throne. There's a huge amount of backstory here. There's Daemon Targaryen, who's a fantastic character, who Otto Hightower clearly doesn't like. There's a lot of contention between the two of them, lots of speculation about why that might be. But the thing that sparked the Dance of the Dragons was when Viserys died. He was having a nap. It's a good way to go. When he died, his will said Rhaenyra should be queen. She should be ruling. But Alicent decided, no, she's not around at the moment. No one else knows that Viserys is dead. Let's put my son on the throne. And that was the start of it. So this was, and we have to remain relatively neutral in this, but we do also have to accept that this was a power grab by the Hightowers. They decided to go against the clear will of the last king to put their own king upon the throne. So that's the sort of the background to it. The Hightowers will definitely be absolutely central to the House of the Dragon when it comes out, and I am very pleased that they've started casting calls, which might be quite early. I shouldn't take it as too much of a hint as to how far they've got into this process, because if they're going to do anything about the Dance of the Dragons, they have to have two main characters, being Alicent Hightower and Rhaenyra Targaryen. And those are the two characters that they've announced that they're looking for. So I think the one positive I would take out of that news is the fact that these are the two, that it seems to be set up as this kind of double header of these two women vying for power, one of whom should be the queen, one of whom wants to be the queen mother. And that seems to be where they're going with this. So hopefully what we're shaping up to is not just lots of special effects and dragons and all the rest of it. Hopefully that will be part of it, but it should be this court intrigue. And what I'm really hoping for is that this starts not with the Dance of the Dragons, but with the build-up that we have there. I mean, if I were writing it, I'm clearly not writing it, but if I were writing it, I'd have a couple of seasons before we even get to the outbreak of war. There's so much fantastic story just in that build-up. Lost in the Fabric, thank you so much, saying no question, just wanted to show some love to one of my all-time favorite channels. Thank you, that's really kind of you to say. So thank you. Misty306 saying, in Deep Geek, please keep the hair up until Halloween. You can create a new Hobbit identity. The hair, I was going to get it cut this week, guys, but the queue was too long. The hair survived for another week. I can't promise another week. I will try again this week to get it trimmed. It's just getting a little too unmanageable for me. Nicole Stewart saying, hello, Robert. With the prominence of House Hightower shown in Fire and Blood, why do you think George R.R. Martin has been silent on the storyline of them within A Song of Ice and Fire? Is there something important about them that, if discussed, it will give away something that's spoiler, like Housedanes' house words? Interesting question. I think there is clear links, but there are clear links between House Dane and House Hightower, as I've already explained. But I don't think that necessarily means that House Hightower have some spoilers. I think that they have this bank of knowledge in the Citadel. They have this way, I guess, it's in my head canon rather than anything else, but if they have got a glass candle, then they have a way of understanding what's going on in the world. That makes them understand what is happening out there. Doesn't necessarily mean that they've got some sort of spoilery thing going on. They have been held back, undoubtedly, but they can't be held back for another book. I'm absolutely certain of that. The fact that the Ironborn are there harrying them and almost certainly about to attack is it means that they will have a role in the next story. Housedanes' words, for those who do not know, George R. R. Martin has admitted that he has not revealed what they are because they might be a bit spoilery, which seems to imply that yes, there is something going on with them, with the Sword Dawn. I mean, even the language, the Sword Dawn, the Sword of the Morning, this all seems to imply the end of the long night. That's not exactly the case for House Hightower. Their house words we know, we light the way, which could just be very boring, is that the Hightower is a lighthouse and they do literally light the way for people to come in. But it's probably just as likely about knowledge and understanding as anything else. So that's they're showing the way forward, and so the information that comes from Old Town will help in lighting the way to how to defeat the others and all the rest of it. So that, I think, is what's their sort of role in all of this. Eric Furg says, how did Sir Jorah, not a tourney knight, win the tourney at Lannisport? Since Jorah is ugly and from a comparatively poor house, how did he win Lyness's favour, let alone Leighton's consent to the match? How does Leighton feel about his daughter being a concubine, albeit a strategically placed one? Okay, so for those who don't know this bit of story, we've talked about it briefly already, but Jorah Mormont, we know him obviously from the books and the show. He ended up, this is way back in time, down in Old Town, taking part in a tourney. He won the tourney, and he won the heart of Lyness Hightower, who was one of the daughters of Lord Hightower, and she went off up with him to Ireland. Now, in terms of the questions that are there, how did he win the tourney? Well, I think there's a couple of answers to this one. Firstly, he is a good fighter. We don't necessarily see it all the time, but because he's not been in that many fights, but he is a good fighter. He defends Dany successfully, and he clearly has got a lot of skills going on. The Northerners don't partake in tourneys. This is very true, but that's more to do with it's not a cultural thing up there, rather than they're not very good fighters. So it's not unlikely. The second bit there is that actually the nature of tourneys was, if you think of them as a sort of a sporting thing, then it's not like you would get in, I don't know, tennis, where you might get somebody winning most of the tourneys all the time because they're simply the best person. It's more like, this is a really tortured analogy, apologies, but it's more like something like golf, where normally you get a different person winning all the time, and you can be sure that whoever wins is good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the best. There are lots of people who are good enough to win a tourney, and we hear about lots of different people winning tourneys at different points. There was not one dominant person who won every tourney. That's not the way it seemed to work out. So we're not told huge amounts about how he won her favor, other than the fact that he was a younger man, he was a war hero at the time, and he just won the tourney. So she was a bit, it's not exactly the same, but if you just imagine as Sansa was very much kind of starstruck with this whole spectacle, and wanting and imagining things could be, the winner of the tourney is wonderful and all the rest of it, that she seems to have been swept up in that, and it was the realization after that was the problem. So what did Leighton feel? Why did he allow her to marry him? Well, it was a reasonable match. She's not the heir. The Mormonts are a good family, and Jorah was the heir to that, so she would be a noble lady, the wife of the Lord there. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense as a match, and they're always all about, the Hightowers are about building their power and influence, and this would be the first bit of power and influence they might get in the north, so it would kind of make sense. How does he feel about his daughter being a concubine? Because this is what happened. They went off when Jorah had to flee Westeros. He and his wife Lyness, they headed off to Essos, and they ended up in Lys. And while he was off sort of fighting and all the rest of it, she got herself set up with this prince of Lys, and became his chief concubine, and that's where she stayed, basically. So what does Leighton Hightower think about that? Well, we've never had a POV chapter from him, so we don't know exactly, but we do know that he seems to have accepted it, because he's sent another one of his children off to her to see whether that she can help negotiate some sales to get a navy. So he clearly sees her as being part of the family still. It's not. It might seem to Westerosi eyes as if that was quite a fall from grace, but actually she is one of the most powerful people in one of the richest cities in Essos. So if you're there looking for power, then actually that's not, she's landed on her feet. So she's done all right. So I don't think that he's that bothered, is the short answer on that one. Let's just have a quick check, see whether I missed any other questions. I don't think I have. Voice of Geekdom. Hi there. Dan is in the chat. If I was talking about my conversations, my Secrets of series, which I do release generally on Wednesdays. I'm starting to branch out from that, having some conversations starting next week. I'm going to have a few conversations with some content creators about issues in Lord of the Rings, as well as A Song of Ice and Fire. So I'll kind of alternate them for a little while, I think. And my first conversation is with Dan, Voice of Geekdom. If you've never come across his channel, he's excellent content creator talking about Lord of the Rings, and we're chatting, and to be released next Wednesday for about an hour or so. We're going to be chatting through the Silmarillion. We're going to introduce it. It seems it's quite a, talking to a lot of people about this, it's quite a sort of the book that you have on your bookshelf, but you might have tried it a couple of times, but it's not an easy read. So what we're trying to do there is just give the overview. If you've not read it but you want to know what's in it, we're trying to set out, there's 5 parts to this. What are each of those different parts? What sort of history is it telling? That kind of things. So if you're interested in that at all, keep an eye out next Wednesday. That video will be going up then. Question from Diego Godoy. Hola, Robert. I am looking forward to this live stream, as I don't know much about this house. I think that's probably true for a lot of people. They're one of the under-discussed houses in this world. My question is, what impact has House Hightower had in the current main Song of Ice and Fire story? Also, I'm dying to see how Long Will the Winds of Winter Be video. Well, I'll start on the first one about what impact they've had. Behind the scenes, they have been, I'm sure, been working. But the whole point here about how they operate is they have been holding their fire. They have a track record of waiting to see who the winners are going to be, and then going onto their side. That, I'm sure, is what has been happening here. But at some point, they will have to just go into defensive mode. They haven't had a huge amount of influence so far, is the short answer, and that I think is deliberate. As for the second question or point, saying I'm dying to see your How Long Will the Winds of Winter Be video. Yeah, I talked about this, I think, last week, and I'm doing a video just trying to work out how big the Winds of Winter is going to be. I've done videos, on my live streams and elsewhere, looking at what it is that will be in the Winds of Winter, and we can get a feel for what's going to be there. We've had some pre-release chapters, we've had some hints from George R.R. Martin, and we've had the story so far, which gives us a lot of hints for what's going to be happening next. So I think that although we don't know all the details, we can kind of map out the shape of the Winds of Winter. And I got this idea, hey, perhaps I could try and figure out on the basis of that how big the Winds of Winter is going to be. I have to say, ironically, when I started writing that video, I hadn't realized quite how long it was going to be. So it has taken me longer than I had anticipated, but I have finished writing it now. So it's now just a matter of recording it and doing all the editing process. So it will be out, I imagine, in a week or two's time, depending on how much time I have for that. But the short answer, spoilers, it's going to be massive, that book. The amount of story that George R. R. Martin has to pack into it is huge. It is not going to be one volume. That's absolutely beyond doubt, in my view. The moment you actually just start getting into all of the different stories, I'm going off on a tangent, but hey, whatever. The moment you start getting into all of the different stories that have to be told, because the point of view characters are in different places, then it's astonishing. You've got all of Daenerys's story, which is going to tie in with Tyrion and Barristan and Victarion and all the rest of it. That's going to be a whole load of chapters to presumably get her all the way back to Westeros. We've got a hugely complicated story, which is with Cersei in King's Landing, has to be dealing with the faith and with the Tyrells, and then we get this invasion from Fagon. We get Dawn, what's going on with them. We get what's Cersei going to do afterwards. Coming around the south, we get this whole thing with Euron going on. And then Sam, we have to see what's happening with Sam down in the Citadel. Then we get all of the Stark kids. Arya's the only person in Bravos. Sansa's the only person in the Vale. What about Rickon? We've got Davos is going to go and try and find him. We've got Bran up north of the Wall. He'll have to have a couple of chapters. Then we get the whole massive thing going on in the north. We get Jon, we get Melisandre, we got this battle with Stannis going on, and then we get the Riverlands, and who knows what's going on in the Riverlands. So when you start adding all these things up, this is not just a short book. This is epic length. When George R. R. Martin says it's going to be huge, he means huge. So yeah, just trying to map out how many chapters do we need just to tell the story that surely has to be told in order to get us to a logical endpoint for that book. It's a lot. That's what I can say, and that explains why it's taken him 9 years, I think it is already, of writing. It's going to be massive. I think I just had another super chat. Rudy H saying, when you say Winds of Winter will not be one volume, do you think George R. R. Martin will release 2 books at once, or one then another one after 5 to 11 years for the Winds of Winter Part 2? Now, I think he's going to write the whole thing. He has resisted calls from his editors to break it down, as effectively what he did in the last 2 books was to tell one story but over 2 different books released at different times. He has resisted calls to do that again. Yes, he did it that time, but I don't think he wants to do it this time. In fact, he did an afterword to A Dance with Dragons, I think, when he underlines this point that he's going to bring all of the characters back together at the same timeline for the next book, all shivering together in the Winds of Winter, I think was the phrase he used. No, I think that what his plan is to do is to finish writing this, and then he's got this massive stack of pages, and then he will say to the publishers, okay, how do we actually print this? And my best guess is that they will publish it as 2 or perhaps even 3 books at the same time. So if you imagine sort of like the equivalent of The Lord of the Rings, 3 books, they were published a few years apart, but 3 books which are all published at the same time, of quite a few hundred pages each. That is what I imagine is going to be happening. Who knows? It's not outside the realms of possibility that we could, and I hate even saying these words, but we could be faced with the situation of him saying, actually, you know what? I said 7 books, maybe it's going to be 8. So that's the only way around this that I can see. But I think that he is working towards the end of what we might loosely call this act, which is the point at which fire and ice have reached Westeros. So the dragons and Daenerys have finally landed, maybe just at Dragonstone, but they finally landed over at Westeros, and the army of the dead, the Whites, the others, have got to the wall, perhaps even just breached the wall. That, I think, is the point at which the book will end, setting it up for the last book, where we have what do we do with this fire and ice armies. So that's the overall thing. So no, I don't think he's going to release this in with staggered way. I think he's going to write to the end of this act of the story, and then he's going to try and figure out how best, with his editors and publishers, how he's going to get it actually published. Okay, I think that's... Michael Brindley, thank you so much for Super Chat, saying hello from the USA. Excited for House of the Dragon. Yes, absolutely, I am. It's... I was disappointed, I have to say, when they cancelled the Long Night one, but the spin-off. But the House of the Dragon will be brilliant, particularly if they do make it about the political intrigue that leads up to the Dance of the Dragons. There are some amazing characters going on there. So as long as we get to see Daemon Targaryen and Mushroom and all the rest of it, then I'm going to be a very, very happy man. Sonata Systems, thank you so much. Very generous super chat, saying best wishes to all still evading COVID in New Mexico. Well, stay safe, everyone. It's still got a long way to run, this, unfortunately, but I'm glad to hear that you are still staying safe there in New Mexico. Let's move to some questions about what happens next in the story for the Hightowers. We've talked a lot about the background to them, their history. But what about what happens next? Morally, you say, with the coming threat of Euron, what will House Hightower do to protect not only its castle's defences, but also the city's defences as a whole? And the Stark and Winterfell connected to that says, do you think Lord Hightower and his daughter might be up there working on a protection spell of some sort, perhaps from Euron or maybe the others? So what has happened is that something has shifted, definitely, for the Hightowers in the space of the last book or so. The thing which precipitated this seems to have been when Euron and the Iron Fleet took the Shield Islands, which are some islands off the sort of the southwest coast of Westeros. That was just a little bit too close for comfort. And so Lord Hightower, basically, he sent his children off to figure out the defenses. So one of them, he said, go build some ships. Another one, he said, sort out the defenses around the city. He sent another one over, as I said earlier, to go to Lyonesse Hightower, who was there to try and buy some cell sails to try and get an extra bit of navy. He's sending his people out to be, train another one, I think, to train some soldiers up. So he's sending his people out to organize the defenses here. So this is all standard defensy stuff. The question is, are they doing something more? Now, you could interpret this sort of delegation from Leighton Hightower, a delegation of tasks to his children, as being he's now actively taken hold of the situation and preparing his defenses, or he hasn't got time to do that, so he's getting other people to do that. He's focusing in on something else. We do not know, and we can speculate, but we do not know what he's doing up there. I suspect the fact that he has seen the threat means that he must know that it's very real. The Iron Fleet or the Ironborn haven't just sort of like threatened. They've been sending spies into the city. They would been trying to set up a blockade of the Honeywine, which is the river that Battle Isle is in. Old Town is on the estuary of. They have been doing the kinds of things that you would expect before launching an attack on the city. So it's not crazy to expect Euron to attack very soon. So are they doing any kind of magical defenses? I think they probably are, but I think that Euron doesn't mind. Euron is actually not just about trying to win battles. He is trying to create this magical inferno. He is doing everything. He is strapping people to the front of his ships so that they will call out to the gods. He is sacrificing his own unborn child because it has king's blood. He is trying to get hold through Victarion, trying to get control of the dragons. He is almost certainly trying to summon up Krakens simply by getting enough blood in the water. He is holding back his own movements of his navy to try and allow his opponents to get more ships closer, simply because he wants a bigger, bloodier, more horrific battle to happen. He wants carnage. His vision is not just for him to win the Iron Throne and rule. He wants to destroy almost everything and then be king over the ashes. That is what his vision is. And I think he probably, in his own crazed way, wouldn't mind at all if the Hightowers are casting magic, because this just adds to this, as I say, the magical inferno that he's trying to precipitate. This is what he is about. He will like this. And if he can go and burn the city down while the Hightowers are casting magical defenses, while people are strapped to are calling out to their gods. Imagine if you attack the Starry Sept, they'll be calling out. He will have Aaron, Aaron Damphair, who's going to be calling out to the drowned god. He's got various other magicians all over the place. This is everything going on. You just imagine that part of Westeros as being this powder keg of magic. That is what he is trying to do. So, yes, we're going to have the Hightowers trying to defend themselves, but I don't think Euron will mind in the least. Lauren T, thank you so much, saying, hi Robert, no question, just a thank you for all the wonderful content and for putting this mysterious house in the spotlight. I can't wait for more to be revealed. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great house, and he has set it up as a great house so that we do speculate about it like this, because he is going to be revealing more about it, I am sure, over the course of the next couple of books. I just spotted in the chat Robinson88 saying, keep George out of New Zealand, by the way. He said he could be looked up over there if he wouldn't have the book in hand by July 29th of this year. So that, yeah, this was the latest of his many promises to have finished the book by certain dates. He goes to Worldcon, the sci-fi convention, every year, and it was due to be held in New Zealand this year. Obviously, he couldn't go, but he had said that if I do not have the book in my hand by that point, then you can lock me up, basically. So we just need to accept the fact that he wants to finish this book, and he is writing this book, but he has a weakness in that he overpromises when he's going to finish it. I did really like his last update, which was a few weeks ago, and he seemed to be completely honest, and he's basically said, I am writing it, guys. I've finished a couple of chapters this week. I finished another one last week. It is progressing, but I'll be honest, I'm writing slower these days because he is getting older, and it is going to be a huge book, and I'm still nowhere near finishing. That he was honest about that, and I appreciate that. As far as I'm concerned, I do not want him to rush it. I want him to put all the effort he possibly can into it. As long as he is still writing, that is all I can ask from him. So all the time he's writing, the book is getting bigger. So as I say, this is going to be a huge book. It's going to be bigger than anything else that that we've had in the series of books so far. Okay, let's have a look at question from the chat, or not the chat, from one of my patrons, Henning J, saying, "Hi Robert, it's striking that Housetower, I've said that, say it 10 times quickly, House Hightower is physically absent in the 5 books so far, with the exception of flashbacks. Do you think any living House Hightower member will make an appearance in the upcoming action? Surely they will have to appear somehow if, for example, Old Town would be under attack." Yeah, so we've had a couple of members of the house appearing. We've had Allery Hightower, who's Marjorie's mother. She's appeared, and we've also had one other random. So Maester Walgrave, and I will talk a bit more about him in a moment because he's a fascinating figure, is the maester that Sam is going to go and stay with while he's in the Citadel. He almost certainly is a bastard-born Hightower. Now, that's interesting in as much as it shows the extent of the links between the Hightowers and the Citadel. So we've got, or in fact, sorry, I should probably say now, he is probably the father of another maester who we will talk about in a moment. So we have got these Hightowers that are around and about, but we've never actually met them. And the main reason, I suspect, is that most of them have stayed in Old Town, and we haven't, until Sam arrived there, we hadn't been to Old Town. So the main way that we might meet them is in a Sam chapter, or possibly we might see them in a, I don't think we're going to get Euron chapters, but maybe Aaron, we might see one of the Hightowers through there. Scott Karacha saying, "I'm wondering why you think the Hightowers have played such a minor role in the show and in the books, so far as they're such an old and powerful family." As I say, yeah, I think this is purely to do with them and their natural way as a family to try and pick the winner, and they're sort of holding back until they know who the winner is going to be. The Stark in Winterfell, do you think it's significant we meet a Hightower in the Citadel? Is it just too many sons syndrome, or are they trying to gather more information? Yeah, so the links between the Hightowers and the Citadel, and also the Faith of the Seven, are very strong. They always have been. This is one of, or two of the ways that the Hightowers have extended their influence. A lot of the High Septons and a lot of the Maesters and Archmaesters have been Hightowers. They are the main patrons. The Hightowers set up the Citadel in the first place, and the Order of the Maesters, they are the people who fund it. So the links are incredibly strong across there. It's not a coincidence that we see Hightowers in these places, because this is how they spread their influence. And if you think about it, which are the two organizations across Westeros that are nationwide, for want of a better phrase, and in the very heart of every single lord and lady's residence across the land. The maesters and the faith of the seven. The children of the lords and ladies of the land are taught by septa, and by maesters. The maesters are there. They're in charge of the communication network with the ravens. They're the people who write up the histories. They're the people who teach people to write. They teach the histories. They the septons, they are the people who teach the morals, the rights and wrongs. This is huge amounts of influence right across the entire continent. And the people who are funding that is the Hightowers. So yes, of course, we will see links across there. This is what we might in today's world call soft power that the Hightowers have. They have their, they have their army, they have their money and all the rest of it. But in terms of their influence, their biggest influence is the fact that they are bankrolling the two largest, most influential cross-continent organizations that there are. They have huge amounts of power when they wish to use it. Holy Drogon saying the Hightowers effectively control both the religion and history of Westeros. They can indoctrinate an entire population by controlling information. Yeah, absolutely. They don't always have complete control. We have to say this. They are bankrolling them, but obviously sometimes the faith go off and do their own thing. Sometimes maesters go off and do their own thing. But the family that has the most control by a long way there are the Hightowers. Question from Sasa K saying Allery Hightower is one of the Hightowers we get in the main series. This is Marjorie's mother, and other than just being the mother to the current generation of Tyrell offspring, we don't really get anything. Do you think that George R.R. Martin planned anything significant with that being her house, or do you think she mainly serves to show that the Hightowers also have Silver Valyrian-esque hair? Yeah, so I think he meant a lot of things here. I've already mentioned the link across with the hair, the hints that perhaps they are not first men. There's something even more ancient going on there. I think that going forward, and I might be preempting some questions I've got later here, but going forward, I think that the Hightower Tyrell link is going to be very important, because what will happen to Marjorie? Almost certainly, and indeed to Mace, almost certainly Cersei is going to kill them or try to kill them. Now, Allery is now back in Highgarden with the Queen of Thorns, so she's safe, but she may certainly find herself at some point within the first half of the Winds of Winter finding that her daughter and her husband have been killed by Cersei. That is entirely likely. That was certainly what happened on the show, and it seems to be the most likely thing that's going to be happening in the books. Where does that leave the Hightowers? Suddenly, the Hightowers are no longer behind Team Lannister, Team Cersei. They will actually actively be against her. So, who is it that they can support who is against Cersei? Well, the most obvious answer at that time there is going to be Fagon. So are the Hightowers going to be the mysterious friends in the Reach that the Golden Company said that they had? It's possible that it's a choice, I suspect, between them and the Tarleys. It has to be an important house down in the Reach. But in any event, the moment that you take out Mace or Marjorie, then that suddenly brings the Hightowers into the politics of Westeros as a whole, because they can no longer stay out of this. The Hightowers and the Tyrells have been playing what they, I'm sure, consider a very clever political game up to this point. But once their people get killed, they can't stay neutral and game it anymore. They have to get involved. So I suspect that will be the catalyst for bringing the Hightowers more into the world of what's going on with the politics of Westeros. Let's go to a question from Lawnduck20 saying, "Hi Robert, will we see vigilance in the Winds? Do the Hightowers even still have the sword? If they do, and Old Town is sacked by the Ironborn, it could possibly fall into Euron's hands, and he would then have a Valyrian steel sword to go with his Valyrian steel armor. That is a terrifying thought." It is. So, do you see it playing a role with Euron or against the army of the dead, or is it just lost to history like Bright Roar? Yeah, so we get this. They have got a Valyrian steel sword, which is called Vigilance, or at least they did. There was a battle, and the holder of it was killed, and then we hear no more. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean it got lost? I mean, possibly. Does that mean that it just nothing exciting happened with it? Very probably. So they have got the money to be able to, although the Lannisters tried for many years to get hold of another one should they wish. New ones cannot be created, but houses are dying out all over the place. One could argue perhaps that's sort of a bit of a stretch, but I think probably vigilance is in the Hightower. Leighton Hightower has it. We do not know. We have no information at all on this, but that is the most likely place for it to be. I have to say, I'd not thought at all until you mentioned it, Lawnduck20, about this idea that Euron might get it. That would be, he has got in the pre-release chapters from Winds of Winter, we see him in what appears to be Valyrian steel armor. If he could have a Valyrian steel sword to go with that, that would be astonishing. So, might he get it? Yes, it's entirely possible. Even if Leighton Hightower himself doesn't use it, then perhaps one of his sons might have it, and perhaps Euron could take it from him. That would be a very terrifying thought. The other option, I suspect, from that is that someone like Sam somehow might, who realizes the importance of Valyrian steel, might take it north to the Wall if he gets a chance to do that. It's not easy to see a route for him to getting his hands on it, it has to be said, but the fact that there is a Valyrian steel sword there, and we aren't told about huge amounts of Valyrian steel swords, does seem to suggest that we will see it or read about it. Chris of Oldstones, thank you so much. By the way, huge thank you to my wonderful moderators. We've got Chrissy, Croc and Tacos, and Andrew K all in the chat, and I'm hoping to have another couple of moderators coming soon as well. They do fantastic work. So guys, thank you so much, and I will get you some reinforcements very, very soon. But the question you just picked up there, so missed super chat from Robin Blackwood. Do you think Euron will go into the Citadel in search of knowledge for his crazy magic stuff? And if yes, what do you think he will find? I think it's more likely, I mean, he might, but it's more likely that he burns it. This is all of the imagery that we've got for Old Town is of Alexandria. Now, Alexandria, it had a lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the world, of the lighthouse of Alexandria, and the Hightower is effectively a lighthouse. And if you look at some of the ancient drawings, they look very similar to the drawings that we have of the Hightower. And Alexandria legendarily had this amazing library of all this ancient knowledge, and then whether it actually happened or not, allegedly it then got burnt down, and the knowledge was lost to humanity, ushering in terrible dark ages and all the rest of it. So that, I think, is the most likely thing that he will do. Could he gain some knowledge from there? Perhaps he will. it's hard to say because we probably won't have many POV characters around there. George R. R. Martin isn't wanting to introduce more. I suspect he probably will have to for the Winds of Winter, but we've got Sam, who is almost certainly going to be doing his thing, but then escaping as quickly as he can once he realizes what's happening. And then we have Aaron Greyjoy, who one would assume that at some point is going to die, but maybe Euron will just drag him around for a while. But if not, then we've not got any other POV characters there. So what will Euron do? I have in my mind, I have got this idea of him having just almost destroyed the city, just wandering through the library, and then just finding what he wants and then sort of casually throwing a match to it and walking out as the whole thing bursts into flames behind him. That just seems like a very Euron thing to do. But again, I don't know how we would see that. It's just an image that really works for me. But I think George R. R. Martin is, in terms of the imagery he's given us, it's going to burn. That's what he's been telling us. Yeah, he could be playing with that and it won't do, but Euron is not there to capture places. He is there to destroy things, and everything there points to being that being what will happen. Rudy H saying, is it just as likely that the Hightowers might be suspicious of Fagon and know about Dany and will side with her, especially since they're an old or magical house? Also, Dany has dragons and Fagon has Jon Con. So it's possible. So one of the things, another video that I've randomly been doing recently was looking at Quaithe and Dany. That one's coming out on, I think, Saturday, actually. And in her warnings to Dany, then it starts off by saying the glass candles are burning, and then it gives a whole series of other warnings. And we often treat that as being just this. This is just an introduction. The glass candles are burning. Maybe this is her saying how she's doing it, how she's talking to Dany. But I think that this is a warning in and of itself. The glass candles are burning means that people can spy on her. That this is what, if you look at what happened with Maester Marwyn, Archmaester Marwyn, when Sam was traveling down to the Citadel, he was being spied on. He didn't know it, but he was being spied on all the way. And so that perhaps is a hint to what will happen, that there are people who have got glass candles can see what is happening in other parts of the world. And we've been told that from the top of the high tower you can see the wall. Perhaps that's just a hint that you could see all over the place if you have a glass candle. It's so yes, it would not surprise me if Leighton Hightower is aware of Daenerys. Yes, they do have Dany does have dragons. The Hightowers aren't necessarily in favor of dragons. They and we'll come on to this in a moment. One of my favorite conspiracy theories when it comes to the Hightowers, the idea that perhaps they have been supportive of this great Maester conspiracy in getting rid of the dragons. But that's the other option, definitely, of who they might support against Cersei. I think that the main point is that they will be against Cersei. John Martin, thank you so much, saying no question, just showing some geek love. That's very kind of you. Lahru Dina Lankara saying, I reckon any Hightower get married to Aegon or Dany. No, I don't think so. I think Aegon is probably going to marry Arianne Martell. Certainly that's going to be the plan from Doran Martell, who is addicted to trying getting his family members married off to Targaryens. That seems to be his default plan for any moment, is to marry off his family to the Targaryens. So I think that he will certainly try and do that. In terms of who's marrying Daenerys, the people who are advising her, or probably at the time will be Tyrion, will have to look to see who is the most advantageous match for her. And the options would be Fagon is an option, definitely, but also Jon Snow is the next most obvious option, assuming he is some equivalent of King of the North in the books at that point. Wilf Moss, thanks for the great content as always. Thank you. Do you think we could get a Euron POV, perhaps a prologue or epilogue? It would be so fascinating. It would, and I thought about this when I was doing that epic video that I've been trying to work on about chapters. I think it would be scary, and I think that this is George R. R. Martin is deliberately keeping us away from seeing the point of view of these characters who are horrific or otherworldly or something. We've not had POV chapters from the others, for example. We haven't had anything from Euron. We didn't have anything from Joffrey or Ramsay or anything like that. He does keep certain characters back, so we don't see things from their perspective. I don't think we will see a Euron perspective. This is why we've had this character, the new POV from Aaron Damphair. His POV has been introduced so that we can see what's going on with Euron. That's the main point of it. So I don't think we will. I think we will just be able to look at what he's doing, and then after Aaron, then I think Cersei will probably take over, and we'll be able to see what's happening with him through her eyes. So I suspect not Euron. I think that he will remain an enigma. Will Moss saying we get a POV from Melisandre though, which is kind of similar though less arc. Yes, I think that. So what I think that the Melisandre POV, two things there. First of all, it did humanize her a bit. It's allowed us to see another side of her, which was very important. So for example, we saw that she had sympathy on Davos. She didn't just hate Davos. She deliberately prevented Davos's son from going off with Stannis because she thought that Davos had suffered enough, and she thought that his son would be safer with her. That's actually quite nice. But more importantly, with Melisandre, this is another example. I've said this a few times, but I think it's fundamental to understanding how characters and why some characters are introduced as POV characters. This is now going to be, for the first bit of the Winds of Winter, our POV on what happens at the Wall. George R. R. Martin introduces a character when we need to see something that's happening in a place, but the POV character who we were looking at this through goes away. So an example, up there at the Wall, Jon is dying. Yes, we might get a ghost POV chapter from him, but in order to see what is happening in the aftermath of his death, we suddenly have a new character introduced, Melisandre. We get Barristan gets introduced, not because Barristan is a fascinating character, he is a really interesting character, but because Daenerys was going to head off, and he knew at the end of Dance with Dragons she was going to fly off, and he needed to show us what was happening in Meereen. So we've now got a POV character in Meereen. Similarly, Jon Connington got introduced. We were seeing what was happening with Fagon through the eyes of Tyrion. Tyrion obviously went elsewhere, not necessarily of his own volition, but once he'd gone, how are we going to see what was happening with Fagon? Therefore, he introduces Jon Connington. So this is what he does. He introduces a new POV character from a sort of a non-main character as a point of view character, so that we can see stuff in a place that is important when the main POV character has gone away. Aaron Damphair is another example. We need to be able to see what's going on there. Googly Woogly, hi there, saying I'm late, just a quick hi and thanks before I start at the beginning. Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate that, and thank you for going back to the beginning. That's really kind. So let's just take a moment, as I do roughly halfway through, just to quickly let you know what's going on with the channel. I've teased a few videos I've got coming up. The Lord of the Rings content, as well as the stuff I've been talking about, the Lord of the Rings content will be carrying on. My second channel, if you're interested in me narrating audiobooks, that's what my second channel, The Well Told Tale, is devoted to, so please do go and check out that. But as I always do, and I always mean it, patrons, thank you. I cannot do this without your support. If you are interested in supporting the channel, if you want to get access to some stuff I do just for my patrons, you've seen that I frame all of these live streams around questions I get from my patrons. That's just one of the benefits there. At various other levels, at $5, for example, you get access to all of the audio that I produce. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, there's other things at other levels, then please do go and check out. There's a link down in the description to my Patreon page. Thank you. Okay, I had a question from Andrew K just picked up a question saying, do you think during Aegon's conquest, besides the threat of the dragons, the Hightowers could have seen it as an opportunity to oust the whores who were growing in power? Yeah, possibly, but it's noticeable that they don't actually push it. So the Hightowers could have used that as an opportunity to go for a grab, because the House Whore, yes, they were quite powerful, but actually the main, the Lords of the Reach, the ruling Lords of the Reach as a whole, were the Gardeners, and the Gardeners were wiped away. They were destroyed. Now the Hightowers could have pushed for them taking over, for them going to Highgarden, for them being the Lords Paramount of the Reach, but they don't really. They allow it to go to the Tyrells. The Tyrells are not as old, they're not as rich, they're not as powerful as the Hightowers, but the Hightowers seem content with staying at Old Town, having their base of power and knowledge and money, and that's it. They are happy not to be seen in the main. This is why, as I say, the Dance of the Dragons is a sort of an exception to this, but they're happy in the main not to be seen as the most powerful, but actually have all of this soft power. So I think that was what was going on there. I don't think they were trying to take over from House Whore or House anyone else. I think that they were just trying to ensure their own survival. And Berus Aurelius, does House Hightower, thank you for the super chat, does House Hightower have a role to play in defeating the others? Would they help Jon, Stannis, or Dany? Thanks for the top-notch content. Thank you. Yes, possibly. I don't think that they... I mean, I've sort of come at this from a few different angles so far in this live stream. I don't think that we're going to see the others come all the way down to where House Hightower are at the moment. I think that House Hightower will be focused in the short term on what's happening with Euron, but they do have knowledge, and I think that there's certainly a way that they could be trying to push that knowledge and help north once they see, if they can see the wall from where they are, then they'll be knowing what's going on. And I think that there's a very good chance that they might be trying to help out, because if there is this link, as we know, with, say, the Maesters, yes, the Maesters are trying to get rid of magic. Undoubtedly, the others on the show, they were just like kind of dismissive and going, well, you know, they're not that important. Then this threats come and go, and frankly, on the show, they were pretty much proven right. But the House Hightower will take it seriously, and they will have access to the knowledge of the Citadel. So, yes, I think they will help out, but as much as they possibly can, but they will be focused on defending themselves against Euron's attack. Okay, question from let's have a quick look. Where did I get up to? So Mara Lee saying Marjorie Tyrell's mother is a Hightower, her father is Mace Tyrell. What role do you see both houses playing in the last two books with regards to Euron's attack on Old Town, Fagon's attack on King's Landing, and so on, and the fates of Cersei? So I think that we're looking at the Tyrells will and the Hightowers will find themselves on the same side. Ultimately, it will be against Cersei. It might be that they are the main bulwark of defense against whatever Euron and Cersei end up doing sort of around the south and west. Because I can certainly see them pushing into Westeros with, let's not forget, Qyburn is almost certainly going to be creating some more undead creatures of some kind. Euron has got his army and whatever his magic will produce. Cersei will, I suspect, pull her army out from the Riverlands to come back and protect her at Casterly Rock. So they will be a formidable force, and I think that the Hightowers and the Tyrells are probably going to be the main opposition to them. Will the fates of the characters be exactly the same as they were on the show? Probably not exactly, because we've got Euron, who's on a completely different agenda. We've got the Hightowers, who pretty much weren't in the show. So I think we will see Euron and Cersei pushing in actually into the Riverlands and quite possibly ending up at Harrenhal. That there's a lot of kind of symbolism of that going on there. Let's go to a question from Bride of Fire, saying, "Hi Robert, what is your favorite Hightower theory, tinfoily or not?" And Stephen Dillon, I talked about this a moment ago, actually. I knew this question was coming. Stephen Dillon says, how much of the Maester conspiracy do you think the Hightowers are part of, if they are at all? I find it suspicious how crippled House Targaryen became right after the dance, which was more or less instigated by members of House Hightower. So this is my favorite go-to conspiracy theory when it comes to the Hightowers. The Hightowers are clearly linked in with the Maesters. The Maesters seem to have, again, this is hints across the piece. We never actually see it completely, but the hints are that the Maesters were trying to get rid of the dragons. Were the Hightowers supportive of this? Well, if you come at it from that perspective, as I say, this is tinfoily. We don't have huge amounts of evidence to support this, but if you come at it from that perspective, then what is it that kills the dragons? It is the Dance of the Dragons. So who caused the Dance of the Dragons? It was the Hightowers, really. They were the ones who went against the chosen successor to the dying king. So they were the ones who prompted this Targaryen civil war. So that's there. But then you also get this wonderful little bit of conspiracy theory. And if there's a better conspiracy theorist in the world of Ice and Fire than Barbary Dustin, and I've not come across them. Barbary Dustin has this fantastic theory about the Maesters, who are, in her view, sort of running things across the continent. And she talks about, or addresses this issue when she's talking to Theon. She addresses this issue of why on earth did the Starks get involved at all in the first case with what was going on in the south. The Starks didn't really, for centuries, millennia, they didn't really care about what happened below the neck. That wasn't really their concern. And then suddenly you get Rickard Stark, Ned's father, who's hugely interested and engaged, and he's going out there marrying his children off to southern lords and ladies, and and getting them fostered in various places towards the south. Where did this sudden interest come from? These Southron ambitions, which is what we hear. Well, what she says is that this was the Maester who he had, Maester Wallace. Now, what's with Maester Wallace? Why is this connected in with anything? Well, yes, obviously he's a Maester, therefore they're connected in with the Hightowers. But she says he is Wallace Flowers. He is, as I sort of name-checked earlier, he is the bastard child of Hightower and an Archmaester. And the Archmaester, we're told, or hinted at, is Archmaester Walgrove, who Sam then goes to, I think I slightly garbled this explanation earlier, but he is the Archmaester that Sam is going to support, who's now very old, and it would appear not entirely with it anymore. So what do we have? We have a bastard child of the Hightowers who has been brought up within the citadel by the Maesters, who goes off, and he is the person who prompts the Starks to get involved in southern politics. That creates this great northern alliance, as it were, by marriage between the North, or it was supposed to be by marriage between the North and the Riverlands and the Vale of Arryn, and this would have, and then by friendship going down into the Stormlands, and all of this up against the Targaryens at a time when the Targaryens were weak. So this is the theory that it's not just the Maesters who have been trying to get rid of the Targaryens, it's also the Hightowers who are behind all of this. And when you think about it, the Hightowers support two huge organizations, as we've said. We've got the Maesters. They wanted to get rid of the Targaryens because they were all magic-y, and they didn't particularly want magic to be ruling the world. And the Faith of the Seven wanted to get rid of the Targaryens because although yes, they got a cozy-ish relationship with them, the Targaryens had never accepted the supremacy of the faith. They'd always said, we're different, we're special, we can do things the rest of you can't, we can marry our siblings, we can have polygamous relationships, the kinds of things that the Faith of the Seven hated. So they also fundamentally would have been interested in getting rid of the Targaryens. And influence works two ways. We talk about the Hightowers having influence over the Maesters and the Faith. The Maesters and the Faith had influence over the Hightowers as well. So I love this idea. As I say, there's hints at it. This is fantastic. Exactly the heart of every good conspiracy theory is there are hints to this, but there's no smoking gun. We haven't got anything that we can say categorically this is definitely the case. So that is my favorite tinfoily Hightower theory, that they have been behind all the attempts to be ridding the world of the Targaryens and the dragons. They've just been hiding it very well. Victoria Gill saying, thank you for the super chat, saying a quick hi bye as I head into work this Friday morning, saying, OMG, you cut your hair. I didn't cut my hair, it's still very long. Look forward to watching tonight. I love your work, Robert. Thank you so much. Okay, so questions from my patrons. So Stark and Winterfell saying, do you think the Hightowers know or remember maybe, what do you think that they know or remember that we don't? I get the same vibe from them as I do from Howland Reed. I understand that. I think that the kind of the vibe link is between the Reeds and the Danes, who know things from back from the mists of time, the reeds from the children of the forest, and the Danes back from the first long night. They clearly have some deep history going on. The Hightowers have also got deep history going on, but theirs seems to be more of an accumulated knowledge and an understanding of what's going on in the world at the moment. So do they know anything extra? Well, I think they know how to find out extra stuff. They've got all of their books of knowledge. They've got probably they've got a glass candle. They can certainly get access to one if they need to. They can find stuff out. So I think that is the slight difference, is that it's not that they've got an historical role that they have to be playing, but they do have this ancient history on their side. Julia Erickson saying, since Old Town might have been a Valyrian outpost, I keep thinking that a lot of knowledge from ancient civilizations might be hidden away and forgotten in the Citadel. Talking about the references to Alexandria that we've got there, and saying, I think it's suggested by historians that the sack of cities in the Middle East, where a lot of Greek and Roman literature was kept, brought back this knowledge that was forgotten in Europe during the Middle Ages. Do you think something similar could happen if Old Town is sacked? That the burning of the library could bring in some sort of renaissance to Westeros as more people gain knowledge of things they have since long forgotten about. I think for me, the bigger thing here, I think that was a fascinating point. I think for me, the bigger point here is that this potentially is the ending of the Maester's monopoly on knowledge. The whole system that we've got down there with the Maesters in the Citadel is them keeping hold of knowledge and just telling people what they want them to know. I think that if you break down that infrastructure, then people can start having access to knowledge more broadly, and that is what I think brings about the Renaissance. The Renaissance, my take on history, there are always cleverer people than me in the chat, and I'm sure that it's exactly the kind of thing others will opine on, but this is the kind of thing, certainly the Reformation, which sort of happened not quite alongside the Renaissance, was very linked, but it was to do with the expansion of access to knowledge. When you get things like the Gutenberg press, this was a huge change for humanity in that, in the West anyway, that China was leagues ahead of the West in many, many ways. And but when we're talking about the Renaissance, we're often talking about the West and Europe in particular. That spread out the knowledge and allowed, whereas previously you would have one book had to be copied out by hand and then passed on to another person. This was a matter of weeks, months, years, perhaps, to produce another book. When you have a printing press and you can start producing dozens, hundreds of copies of things, you expand the access to knowledge hugely, and that is what can allow more and more people to sort of innovate and discover new things. So that, I think, is where we're at, or just before that is where we're at in this world of ice and fire, is we've got the people who are keeping hold of knowledge and preventing others from learning and growing. That system has to be destroyed somehow in order to allow for the knowledge to spread out. I don't think we'll see it. Incidentally, I think we'll just see the end of the old way of doing things. I don't think we're going to see, and this is what happens in 50 years' time when the Maesters aren't quite so all-powerful. Brian Real, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, no question, just wanted to give some support to one of the best A Song of Ice and Fire creators. Thank you. And say thanks for helping me get into the books, including Fire and Blood, as well as Duncan Egg. Cheers, Robert. Thank you very much. It's one of the great rewards of doing what I do, is when people get into stuff because I've recommended it or I've helped to explain it or open it up in some way. It's always a very humbling thing, but it's fantastic to hear. Thank you very much. question from Brennan Barnes saying, my Hightower question is regarding house qualities. We don't know many Hightowers, but the ones we're exposed to the most, Otto and Alicent, come across to me as the clear instigators and antagonists of the Dance of the Dragons. As I said, I would agree with that. We have Jorah's ex, who drained him financially and then left for greener pastures, and a Kingsguard who basically tells Jaime to leave it alone when Jaime questions the Kingsguard stand by and allow the king to abuse his wife. To use this to inform how we can expect characters like Leighton and Melora, who's the mad maid that I was talking about, to act when we encounter them entirely in their own self-interest. What's your take on this? So do the Hightowers act entirely in their self-interest, and should we therefore see that as being what we should expect when we do meet some Hightowers? Well, I think there's an element of truth in this, in that clearly the Hightowers are looking to preserve their house, their family above all. They have a long history of this, not just in the examples you've given, but more broadly going back through history, letting their city burn, but keeping themselves safe, that kind of thing. Now, are all of those characters purely acting out of self-interest? I personally think that when we get Gerald Hightower, who's the member of the Kingsguard, he isn't so much acting out of self-interest as being a complete job's worth, as all of that Kingsguard were, and taking their vows completely seriously. And he was the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard at the time, so it was him setting the lead for all the rest of them. So that seems to be his motivation. That why would they fight Ned at the Tower of Joy? Because they promised they would stop Ned getting in there. Yes, practically speaking, it doesn't make huge amounts of sense, but that is what they promised, and that is what they will do. I did a whole video on that if you're interested, but that is the feeling that we get, is that that Kingsguard will do what they are told to do, what they have promised to do, what they have vowed to do, even if it makes no sense. So that, I don't think that's self-interest so much as just following orders, which is not always a good thing. Should we see Leighton and Melora be acting in self-interest? Probably. Well, in as much as they will definitely be trying to preserve House Hightower, yes, I think so. They have been playing the game. This is what has been happening so far. Incidentally, we've not seen it. This has all happened off page, but the Hightowers could have got involved a lot earlier. They could have declared their support for somebody a lot earlier, but they didn't. They've been hanging back. They've been waiting to see who comes out on top, just supporting whoever is the most powerful at the time. That's the House Hightower way. So yes, we should expect that, but it would not surprise me if there's a little bit more going on here. If we do see them slightly more proactively trying to help events out, that the talk of magic is not just a rumor. I'm sure of that. I think that we will see more from them. Stephen Dillon saying, how do you think the Bran the Builder made the Hightower legends go down in Old Town and in House Hightower especially? I don't think that they really will be bothered about that. I mean, we've not heard we've only got this sort of a casual mention of that Bran the Builder might have built it. I don't think it really will bother them. The House Hightowers, the Hightowers predate House Stark and Bran the Builder by centuries, if not millennia. This is the when I say they're ancient, they are ancient. Just so you get the context, you get Bran the Builder, who is the founder of House Stark, is supposed to have built the Hightower. this was the 5th tower that was there. So they built 4 huge wooden towers, one after the other, lived in them for a while, and then they stopped working. And before that, they lived for a while just in the base thing that was there. So they'd been there for ages before Bran the Builder came along. He's not the founder of their house. Yes, he built or allegedly built the house, or the top bit of their house is there. I don't think it's going to bother them in the slightest. If anything, it's the equivalent of saying we had a really a well-known architect build this one, and hey, they did a good job. What you can say about the things that are put forward as Bran the Builder's creations, they have survived well. They've survived for millennia. Storm's End is still an incredibly hard castle to take. The wall is still incredibly hard to pass. The Winterfell crypts are still, other than that one section which caved in, but there's a reason for that, I personally believe, the majority of it seems to be in incredibly good condition. What Bran the Builder built stayed built, and it stayed true to its purpose through the years. So I think that they, if anything, they'd be pretty proud of it. Morally saying, what do you think will be the fate of the Queen of Thorns, Olenna Tyrell, in the last 2 books, as opposed to what happened on the show? Well, I think that, so in the books, then she has gone back to Highgarden. Now, I think she will die again. I think that the Tyrells will get wiped out. The only question for me is who's going to do it. I think it might actually be Euron rather than Jaime and the Lannister army. There's a big question mark about whether Jaime even returns to Cersei. He might do, but briefly. The Cersei-Jaime relationship has been working through differently in the books to how it was on the show. So I'm not 100% sure whether that's the case. I think the fact that Cersei will escape over to Casterly Rock, I think almost certainly puts a slightly different twist on things, because this isn't then... and the fact that we've got Fagon, who's going to be taking King's Landing, and so Daenerys is going to be facing up against him rather than against Cersei and the Lannisters. This makes a huge amount of difference to who goes where and why. It's entirely possible that we will get the same kind of switcheroo thing that happens with Tyrion trying to take Casterly Rock and Cersei not being there. She might then head off and from there go and take Highgarden, and then from Highgarden move on to somewhere else. So that's entirely possible, but it's one of those things where it's slightly too early in the story to know for sure. I think that she won't survive, but and Highgarden, we've been told, is not a very defensible castle. I don't think she has huge amounts of hope there, and the bulk of the Tyrell army is over in the east towards King's Landing and all the rest of it. So there's not huge amounts of hope for her, I don't think. Scott Karacha saying, do you think Jorah's former marriage to a Hightower will benefit or go against Dany's need for approval in Westeros? I don't think it's going to make huge amounts of difference. The only real difference this might make is with her relationship with the Hightowers themselves. I think as far as the rest of the world is concerned, if she has Jorah as her sort of a close confidant, then yes, maybe the North might object, but most of the rest of the world won't care. The fact that he was married to a Hightower doesn't make much difference to anyone, I think, other than the Hightowers themselves, who seem to still see her as a resource now, or a member of the family. So I think the short answer is I don't think this is going to make huge amounts of difference. The question for me is whether they stop off at least on the way. They being Dany and Jorah stop off at least on the way, and if so, what happens there? There are so many. You can make cases for Dany stopping off at 3, 4, 5 different places on her way to get to Westeros. Lys is one of them, probably the least likely that they will. So it would not surprise me if that whole subplot just almost disappears. He's moved on. Maybe she was his kryptonite, but now he's obsessed with Dany, not his ex-wife. Persephone. Oh, I'm down to 2 more questions now from my patrons. So now is the time in the chat to drop a few questions down there, and I will get to as many of them as I can. Persephone saying, I was wondering how each house gets its name, flag or standard, and where do their words or house mottos come from? Well, it's never sort of, the entire history of this is never sort of made clear. It seems to be just the kind of thing that's emerged over time. This is something that happened in the real world that we know. Certainly when you get like banners and symbols, is that this was how you could tell each other apart in battle. You would have to have a different color from your opponents, or you'd have a standard or something like that, something that you could tell each other apart. Otherwise, then you're in battles. And they showed this really well in like the Battle of the Bastards, for example. If you remember back to that episode, they showed it really well on the show. It's very hard. That's what warfare at the time was very much like. It's just things coming at you all the time. You wouldn't necessarily know who's on your side, who's not. So you've got different colors, you've got banners and things like that, so that you can tell who's on your side and who isn't. And out of that would have come the sort of the banners. In terms of the house words, this is something which is not unique, but this is not coming specifically from sort of the same kind of Western European heritage that George R. Martin draws a lot of his histories of sort of Westeros and houses and all the rest of it. So this is a thing that is there. I think from a sort of a writing perspective, a lot of this is probably tied in with his need to, or his desire for there to be interesting phrases like "winter is coming," and the fact that the North had to remember things. Now, that it was then very easy to sort of like expand it as again, this is trying to get into the mind of the writer, but it's very easy then to sort of expand that idea out that all the houses have got their own house words. What do they... The idea, though, is very much that this is an expression of what the house is about in some way. And, Elena Tyrell goes on that wonderful little rant about how the House Tyrell words are really quite pathetic compared to "Ours is the Fury," or "We do not sow," or "Winter is coming," or something like that. So this is an idea of an expression of what the house is about, which, when you've got places that are, you have to travel, it takes weeks, months to get from one place to another. You have to have some kind of shortcuts to understand what different houses are like, and one of them would be a banner, and one of them would be a phrase. So that seems to be the history of where all of that comes from. Fedra the Beloved says, my question is not really related to the Hightowers, but I was wondering what your advice would be for someone that wants to start writing fantasy, assuming they've never written anything before. Given your knowledge of the fantasy literary genre, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Well, thank you for asking me. That's really kind. I think what I would say is 2 bits of advice. Well, firstly, great. I think writing is a fantastic thing to do, and I think if you feel drawn to it, then do it. 2 bits of advice I would say on this one. First one is and this applies for writing, but I think it applies for many things in life, is just start writing, just start doing it. That's the best way to learn how to do something. People often ask me, how do you do YouTube videos? How do you actually build a YouTube channel? And the answer is you just start doing it, and then you learn on the job. You make a video, you think it's rubbish, you figure out what it is that you can do to improve it, you move on. The same principle is there for writing. You write something, the first thing you write hopefully should be the worst thing you ever write, because you can see how you can improve it. So that's the first thing, is just write. And then the second thing I would say is find a writers group. There are millions of them, probably in your local area, probably also online, definitely online. Find a writers group. And get some feedback on what you're doing. There's a lot of massive science fiction and fantasy online writers groups. Have a look for Critters. I think is probably still going, which is probably still the biggest one. So if you get feedback from people, that is and also if you give feedback to people, that's a really good way of learning, of seeing, of going through the mental processes of understanding what works and what doesn't work. So that would be the two bits of advice I would give. But as I say, I'm not a published fantasy writer. There are many people with better ideas, I'm sure, out there. And indeed, as is always the case, there are people in the chat who can give other bits of advice. Arcanix 1971, first step in writing fantasy: read a lot of fantasy, read a lot of history, and at any period you're inspired by it, repeat and repeat and repeat. Second step, start writing even if you have no ideas. Yeah, absolutely, I would definitely agree with that. Andrew K saying, I could be wrong, but the Hightowers and their tower persevering seems to be such a constant over so many millennia. But personally, I do not see that changing. Yeah, one of the bits of symbolism, interestingly, with the Hightower is this idea of time. Now, the tower itself, massively tall, and the people who live in Old Town tell the time by the shadow of the Hightower, and that is so it's effectively a massive sundial. So this is an idea that time just keeps on going for the Hightowers. They stay there, and time moves around it. So that is a lot of the symbolism that we've got going on there with the Hightowers. Absolutely. Lots of people suggesting possible real world inspirations here. Borgia's saying a couple. Weirwood's talking about them. Vicky Lucas talking about the Hightowers as biding their time, and so a link across with Margaret Beaufort, and Carl Karsnark linking across to the House Hightower words, saying we light the way, but for what and for whom? This, I think, operates on at least 3 different levels. We light the way. The Hightower is a lighthouse, so they do literally light the way for ships to come in and out of the estuary. Then the Old Town is where information is stored, and we get obviously the spiritual guidance from the 7. So we light the way has a sort of a slightly more metaphysical meanings, that they hold the knowledge and guidance and learning for things going forward. And then thirdly, and this is the bit that is intriguing, is whether there's some other hint to this, because it has these kind of, in the same way that we get Housedane having the sword of the morning and the sword dawn, that's all about light coming into the world, and the Hightower, we light the way. It's kind of along the same lines, really, isn't it? This idea that they will show the way. So perhaps what we're looking at, and this was what I was trying to say a bit earlier, perhaps what we're looking at is that they will show the way through the knowledge and understanding that they have accumulated. They will show the way on how to defeat the others, how to save Westeros. And also not just defeating the others, I should say there's also the book The Death of Dragons, which I've not really mentioned here, but clearly there are some people looking for that. And there are twin threats to Westeros, ice and fire, both of which could destroy it. This, I think, is going to be where they get the knowledge of how to push back both ice and fire. And when I say they, then this is going to be a number of people, but Sam primarily. I think the Faceless Men will also get involved in this as well, but Sam primarily will head back up to the wall with knowledge of how to be defeating them, the others, or knowledge of what happened in the olden days that they can apply in some way. He will also perhaps learn about the Horn of Winter that he is, I suspect, carrying around with him, not knowing what it is. So, lighting the way, showing how to achieve the victory and the balance that is needed. Roblinson88 suggesting the Medici for a bit of inspiration. Barris Aurelia saying or asking, who are the allies of House Hightower? Who, if anyone, will come to help them when Euron attacks? Well, the Tyrells should, because the Hightowers technically are bannermen to the Tyrells. One of the things which is interesting, though, about the Hightowers is that although they are these sort of arch politicians gaining influence across the piece, most of their marriages, the political marriages, are with families in the Reach. They married into the Tyrells, the Rowans, and all the rest of it. Their aim seems to be focused around consolidating their power where they are rather than anything else. Yes, obviously one of them married to the Mormonts, and there was the Dance of the Dragons, but as I say, what happened with the Dance of the Dragons seems to have been more of an aberration than what the usual House Hightower strategy has been over the ages. So who's going to come and support them? Well, there's not much. The point of them, I suspect, is that the Reach will support them, and they have the money to go off and buy whatever else they need, and so that is why they're trying to buy sails, which so a navy. Basically, they're going to try and buy themselves a navy, and they may try and buy themselves some sellsword companies while they're at it, I guess. Somebody, so I just quickly flicked past it, but somebody picked up on the link to The Man in the High Tower, which is obviously Philip K. Dick story. It was the only Hugo Award-winning story from Philip K. Dick, which is astonishing given his back catalogue. But it also got made into a TV show. But the idea there is very much about the person who can see what's really going on in the world, an alternative world, as it were. Is that a hint to what's happening here? George R. R. Martin does like to borrow things from other writers that he likes. I can't believe it's a coincidence that he has a man in the High Tower. It's at least a nod in terms of the language. Whether it means anything more than that, I don't know. Okay, I think that's probably it. Robin Blackwood, this is an important point here. I said about whether the fire Library of Alexandria actually happened. Robin Blackwood saying, think the general consensus with historians about the fire at the Library of Alexandria is that it did happen, but it was a way smaller fire than people think. Only like 10% of books burned. Yeah, I mean that's what I've heard as well. But I think that the George R. R. Martin is using the legend. He's relying on the legend to be in our minds rather than the sort of historical truth of it. Whether that means perhaps not all of the citadel will burn down, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, it's entirely possible. Thank you very much for that. I always love it when people in the chat can add in some extra bits of knowledge from history or wherever that we can all learn from. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to pull this one to a close now. Thank you. This has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed digging into this fascinating family. Next week, as I say, I will do one on the Targaryens. Obviously going to be a massive topic, so I'm expecting lots of questions on that one. But if you are interested in the meantime, if you're watching this back a little bit later and you're interested in getting to see a few of the other live streams that I've done, there's going to be a link appearing somewhere around here. If you're interested in supporting the channel, in getting access to some stuff that I do exclusively for my patrons, there is a link going to appear somewhere around here. That's it for this week. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.